Hey folks, welcome back. I'm your host, R.R. Slugger, and today we're going to be discussing colors, specifically trans colors within LEGO. With International Transgender Day of Visibility right around the corner, I thought this would be a fortuitous time to celebrate both our trans friends and family, as well as the trans colors we use in LEGO every day. Before we get to the bricks though, I want to talk about this video's sponsor. Human decency and compassion for the well-being of others. It's absolutely free and guaranteed to improve your relationships with friends and strangers alike. On a more personal note though, besides the trans people in my private life, one trans woman I'd like to highlight here is Wendy Carlos. Her work on pioneering synthesizer music in the 1960s led to major revolutions in the acceptance of the genre. Switched on Bach is a definite inspiration of mine. In fact, all of the music I've created over the years for this channel relies heavily on synthesizers, and I don't think it would have happened the way it did without Wendy's contributions to music. She's far from the only trans person who's inspired the art I create, but I wanted to make special mention of her here. Within the world of LEGO, trans colors, short for transparent colors as I've been told, have been around nearly as long as the brick system itself, with some of the earliest examples hailing from the 50s. According to Bricklink, there are 23 distinct trans colors in LEGO, ranging from the prolific to the obscure. Today, I want to focus in on the Big 10, that is, the 10 trans colors that appear in 1,000 sets or more. Because this is YouTube, and YouTube loves top 10 lists, I guess I'll go from my least favorite to my most favorite of these colors in ascending order. I'll try to highlight notable pieces in my collection as we go. Number 10. Kicking things off at the bottom of my list is Trans Orange. Not to be confused with its flashier, cooler sibling, Trans Neon Orange. Trans Orange sits squarely here simply because of this unflattering comparison. You'll hear me gush more about Trans Neon Orange later on this list, but as far as Trans Orange is concerned, what is there to say? It's a duller, more muted, transparent orange tone that loses the toyetic pop that Trans Neon Orange once had. 2004's Alpha Team ushered this color into LEGO system, and since then, it's appeared in over 2,000 sets, much to my chagrin. Despite its ubiquity, I'd personally be hard-pressed to find an example of its implementation that I felt wouldn't have been better served by Trans Neon Orange. Nearly all sets where I've swapped these colors look noticeably more lively and vibrant with their neon counterparts. I guess Mars Mission might look better with its original Trans Orange pieces, but that isn't saying much. That series would need a lot more than a neon upgrade to be any good. Number 9. At the number 9 spot, we have the artist formerly known as Trans Black, now more commonly referred to as Trans Brown. This color was absolutely everywhere in the early 2000s, and only seemed to grow in popularity as the decades rolled on. Only recently has it shown signs of wavering, as a new star has entered the limelight. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with this color, but again, it's another example of one that I feel does a job worse than an alternate option on this list. These tinted windows might appeal to some, but to me they're rather dull. More than anything, I think I just got sick of seeing this color everywhere in LEGO's catalog. Like DeForest Kelley's stunt double in Star Trek V, once you start noticing it, it becomes all you can notice. Number 8. At number 8, we depart from active dislike and enter, I actually kind of like this color. Trans Green is the color that claims this spot, and in my opinion, it's the most niche of all the hues on this list today. Like, it's a color that's existed prominently since the 70s, and evidently LEGO feels it needs to continue to exist, yet it doesn't seem to have that many use cases. Compared to any of the other transparent colors that predate the 90s, Trans Green finds itself in the fewest number of sets. Very rarely is it used as a prominent element, though the late 90s were exceedingly kind to it in that regard. It's hard to imagine a series like Insectoids or Hydronauts without it. More often than not, trans green is content filling minor service roles within a set, lest it draw too much attention to its presence. I have to believe that a significant number of the sets that use this color utilize it as navigation lights and nothing else. I do enjoy how it became the de facto police color for a little bit in LEGO's history. I think it fit the vibe well, and Space Police 2 is certainly made the better by its inclusion. Overall, I think this is a color that stuck to what it was good at, and didn't get roped into roles it was ill-suited for. Number 7. Number 7 goes to a color that kind of puts this philosophy to the test: trans yellow. I think it does a few things really well, but isn't that impressive in other applications. For example, there's simply no better color within LEGO's palette to represent artificial sources of light. Flashlights, porch lights, headlights, and patio lanterns are all made better with trans yellow. That being said, I can't say I'm a particularly big fan of the color itself. In a vacuum, this is probably my least favorite trans color on the list today. Not to be crass, but it kind of just looks like urine to me, and that's yuck. I don't want to play with that. So outside of its previously stated use cases, I'm usually pretty leery on building models with this color. And since I already upset Gen Z LEGO Space fans with my Mars mission comment earlier, I'm gonna be fair and upset Gen X LEGO Space fans now too. I don't think the trans yellow windows on the classic spaceships look very good. Number 6. Now that everyone is mad at me, let's take a look at the most neutral transparent color possible: trans clear. In essence, it's the absence of color, and LEGO is a particularly good medium for this material. Older brick types were rather cloudy, but modern pieces more often than not lean into its see-through characteristics. Beyond that, it makes for fairly convincing display stands or tools to assist in photography. I often use trans clear elements to get the shots I need, even if I find it a little humorous that we all silently agree to collectively pretend that we can't see these pieces. What pieces? Number 5. Almost a polar opposite compared to the previous entry, trans red takes our number 5 spot. With its dark, imposing hues, it would be hard to ignore this color's presence in a build. Like trans green, trans red has its niche purposes, including navigation lights on the opposite wing. It also featured prominently within a wave of Space Police. Where they differ, though, is that trans red was able to more readily break into the mainstream of LEGO through its more prominent adoption within series like Star Wars and other popular themes. Because of this, trans red sits a little higher on my list, even if my appreciation for both is roughly equal. Number 4. At the number 4 spot, we have the only color on my list that I think is downright mislabeled: trans dark blue. Shouldn't this just be trans blue? It's very obviously the transparent version of the solid LEGO color of the same name, just like its compatriots. Plus, trans dark blue has existed since the 70s, and dark blue didn't become a brick color until 2001. I guess it's just Bricklink's categorization standards being weird again. Good thing it's not an official resource. Oh wait. Anyways, I like trans dark blue, or whatever it's called. It's one of the hardest trans colors to actually see through, but its hyper-saturated tones more than make up for this in my eyes. It alone saved series like Futuron or Explorians from being as generic looking as modern LEGO space offerings. It's punchy, dynamic, and leaves a lasting impression. I dig it. Number 3. And then we come to a color that's just slightly better. Trans light blue carries nearly all of the positives of trans dark blue over, but improves the transparency considerably in the process. I think this makes trans light blue a better candidate for almost any application, potentially barring LEGO Space though. Of the three colors commonly used for windows, this is my favorite of the bunch. It's meant to be noticed, but in a pleasant and non-overpowering way. It's no wonder to me why trans light blue has seen so much use and continues to do so to this day. Number 2. Here we go, the runner-up. I can almost guarantee that it isn't going to be what you're expecting. In the number 2 spot, we have trans neon green. I know, the Rock Raiders guy isn't picking the obvious Rock Raiders color. What the slug? Just hear me out. Trans neon green is still great. Fantastic even. It largely defined an entire era of LEGO Space, then bled into system sets as a whole. Most of the time, I think it was used to good effect, but there were some cases where I felt trans yellow would have been more appropriate. Trans neon green kind of overstepped its bounds and started invading the turf of other, more suitable colors on occasion. Because of this, and other subjective reasons, I'm bumping it down to the number 2 spot. Yes, I was bummed when LEGO retired this color, but at least there was a worthy successor waiting in the wings. Trans bright green is fine, and honestly wouldn't have changed the 90s aesthetic all that much had it been used in place of its neon predecessor back then. But retiring trans neon orange? No, that was the greater loss. Trans orange is nothing but a pale imitation, and a poor one at that. The removal of trans neon orange from LEGO's color palette is like an open wound that's been left untreated. That's why it gets the number 1 spot. Number 1. With an unparalleled level of vibrancy, trans neon orange is hands down my favorite transparent LEGO color. It has a presence unlike any other, transparent or otherwise. LEGO flame pieces molded in trans orange look weak and pathetic, but the glowing intensity of trans neon orange is the perfect fit. I can't think of a single instance where trans neon orange was used erroneously and another color would have looked better. It's the Midas touch of LEGO colors to me, and I think it absolutely deserves the number 1 spot on this list. To clarify though, I'm specifically referring to the version of this color that existed prior to 2005, where after they seemed to water it down and thin it out. As far as I'm concerned, that's a completely different color that Bricklink should recognize as distinctly different, but what else is new? So, for about a decade, trans neon orange was the cool kid on the block who could do no wrong. But, you know what they say, those who burn brightest, burn fastest. Though relatively short-lived, trans neon orange made an unforgettable mark on LEGO's history and has proven to be irreplaceable in its legacy. It's no mystery that these two colors would end up in the top 2 together, as I've made separate videos on both of them in the past. The older of which was actually one of my big breaks on YouTube, oddly enough. A not insignificant number of viewers watching right now got their start with RR Slugger on that video way back when. Let me know if that's you. Anyways, thanks for watching everyone. I've been your host, RR Slugger, and I'll see you next time for another video.